Hello again and welcome back to our course on PSE 2018. In this section we're going to look at preferences. If you've used a relatively recent version of PSE, you can almost certainly skip this section. First of all, I'll answer the question, what are preferences? And then I'll show you an example of one of the preferences you can set and the impact that it has. We'll look at some reset options, and then we'll look at editor options that you need to check and set, and finally at organizer options that you need to check and set. First of all then, what are preferences? Preferences are a mechanism whereby you can personalize PSE to your own requirements. And the various aspects of personalization feature in both the editor and the organizer. So you actually have editor preferences and organizer preferences, although there is a bit of an overlap between them as well. Many of the preferences probably won't mean much to you at the moment, so I'll cover most of them as we go through the course. But there are a few that you need to check and set before you do anything, and in particular before you save any images, and it's really those important few that I intend to cover in this section. But before we do, let me just show you an example of what preferences can do. I'm currently running the editor, and on the left there is a little toolbox, and I'm going to hover over the toolbox. I'm going to hover over one of the tools there, the one with the picture of an eye. And what comes up is a little tooltip, eye tool, to remind me what that tool does. If I move down to the brush, again there's a tooltip, whiten teeth. Now if you don't want to see those tooltips, you may wonder why you wouldn't want to see them, but some people can find them distracting, and after you've been using PSE for a while, you probably don't really need the tooltips. You can go into the preferences by clicking on Edit and then Preferences, and going to the General page. And one of the options there in the Options section is Show Tooltips. Now let me uncheck that, click on OK. Now let me hover over the eye again, and I don't get a tooltip. So that's the sort of thing you can do. Now that's a pretty simple example, and some of the preferences are a lot more significant than that, but that's the basic idea. Now let me go back into those preferences again, click on Edit, go to Preferences. Note the keyboard shortcut there, Control K. In fact, the preferences are arranged in pages, and each page has a name. So the first page there is General, then we've got Saving Files, Performance, Scratch Disk, Display and Cursor, and so on. And as I say, many of these we're going to come to as we work our way through the course. But one very general point to be aware of is this. When you're using this Preferences dialog, you may make a change on, say, one page. Let's say you decide to put tooltips back on again, and then maybe go to another page such as transparency, make a change there, grid colors, might change it from light to medium, doesn't really matter what that means at the moment. But anytime you're using the preferences, if you've made some changes and you think, oh no, I don't want to do that at all, you can reset using this reset button over here on the right. And you'll see that any changes that I've made have been reset. So for instance, the grid color setting is back at light, and if I go to General, I'll see that my checking of Show Tooltips has been unchecked again, although on this occasion I am going to check it because I do want the tooltips on. On the General page, there is also a wider set of reset options. And one of them is Reset Preferences on Next Launch. Now what Reset Preferences on Next Launch does is this. When you install PSE 2018, you have a set of default preferences, and over the time that you're using PSE 2018, you may change them in groups or one at a time, and you may finish up with some very different preference settings to the ones that you had originally. That option, Reset Preferences on Next Launch, if you like, puts it back to what some people would call factory defaults. So this is how it was originally. This can be particularly useful if, for example, you're using an installation that somebody else has been using, or you've started doing a completely different sort of work with PSE and you want to go back to basics and reset all your preferences again. That can be a very useful option. Something else that you'll see as we go through PSE is that you get warnings about things, and sometimes the warnings are very helpful. In fact, usually they're very helpful. But once you've received a warning a couple of times, you may find it a bit annoying. You may say, well, I know about that. I don't need you to keep warning me about that. You can switch off most of those warnings individually at any time that they appear. If you want to reset all those warnings, there is a Reset All Warnings button, and if you click on that, then from that point onwards you'll start getting all the warnings again. So that's the second option in that reset group. The third option, Reset Auto Smart Tone Learning, we're going to look at when we do Auto Smart Tone quite a bit later on in the course. So let's look at the editor preferences that you should check and, if necessary, change. First of all, go to the Units and Rulers page, and in particular you need to check that top setting. My rulers will currently work in inches, and I'm going to stick with inches, which is probably the preferred setting if you are a US user and for many UK users. Although also for many other UK users they would prefer metric settings, as would most European users, and in fact users from around the world, a very large proportion, would prefer metric units. So if you click on the drop down here, you have the option of centimeters or millimeters. The top option there is popular with some users, measuring everything in pixels. And note the other options there, points, picas and percent, which you may prefer. However, I believe most users will choose either inches or centimeters or millimeters. The other settings on this Units and Rulers page, such as type, I'm going to keep type at points, and when we're talking about type sizes I will be referring to type sizes in points. Print sizes I suggest you have set at the same as rulers unless you have a reason not to, and similarly photo project units the same. Having said that, you can set those differently if you want to. I suggest you work on a little bit more in the course before you make any decisions about changing those. The other editor preference to check is application updates. I mentioned this earlier on in the course. You have two options. You can say to PSE either automatically download and install updates, so when updates appear you really don't have to get involved, or, and this is the setting that I prefer, notify me when an update is available. I use this because I like to control the time that updates are applied. Sometimes, particularly if I'm, say, recording a course like this one, I don't want the PSE software to change partway through me doing something. But the most important thing to do, whichever of these two options you have set, is to make sure that the updates do occur. So if you choose the second option like me, make sure that you actually implement the updates. And in fact, when I finish this section, I'm going to implement the update that is pending for PSE 2018 straight away. Let's now run through the equivalent organizer preferences. You access the organizer preferences in just the same way, and they pretty much work in the same way. The list is slightly different, the preferences are generally different, although some are the same. And if you look at the general page in preferences, for example, the very first option there, print sizes. Do you want print sizes to be specified in inches or in metric units? You will be doing some printing, so it's important to get that setting right as well. And then a couple of other very important settings. When you are looking at catalogues, when you're looking at images in a catalogue, do you want the oldest first within a day, or do you want the newest first within a day? Now mine are currently set at show oldest first within each day. I'm going to change that to show newest first within each day. And then for the date format, you can use the US style month, day, year, the non-US style day, month, year, or you can put year, month, day. I'm going to stick with the US format. Now you need to go to camera or card reader settings. And one of the very important settings there is in the Files section. As soon as you start capturing images in the organizer, and we're going to be doing that in 2 or 3 sections from now for the first time, they are going to go to a default location. And the default location is a Windows location under your users, in my case, TOBA folders. So this is one of your Windows folders, and it's the Pictures subfolder. And that's where images that you capture, say from a camera or phone, are going to be stored by default. It's worth remembering that you can change this setting later. So if you're going to work on the principle that you'll put them there for now and move them later, that's fine. But be aware that you can specify a different location here if you want to. One reason that you may want to, and this is a very popular reason, is that if you prefer to keep your photos not on your C drive, but on another drive, maybe a large external or internal drive, or even on a network, you can change this location now. Use the Browse button on the right to select a different folder, and then any pictures that you capture will go into that folder by default. And right at the bottom of this same page, there's another very important option: delete options. When you copy pictures, say from an SD card or phone or whatever, you have options for what happens after the copy. And these are the 3 options for this particular situation. After copying, do not delete the originals. And that's the one that I always keep. I never automatically delete anything in PSE. But you can also say, after copying, verify and delete originals. What happens there is that PSE checks that the copy is perfect and then deletes the originals. And then the third option is, after copying, delete originals. Now some people prefer the second or third option there. Maybe they're short of space on an SD card, maybe they're so confident in the copying over, or maybe what they're copying over isn't that important anyway, that they're just going to delete it and work with what they've got. You choose the setting that suits you, and of course, as with pretty much all of these preferences, you can change the preference later if you want to. In fact, having said that, I should make the point that once you've been learning PSE for a while and using it for a while, it's a good idea to come back and browse through these preferences and see if you're happy with them all, and maybe find out about any that you're not yet familiar with. Having said that, I will be covering most of the preferences during the course. So make sure that you have reviewed at least the ones that I've covered in this section and made your current choices. I'll see you in the next section.